How can we deal with scope creep in our indie game projects? Is it always a bad thing? The answer may surprise you. How can we also streamline our projects so that they can be the best that they can be? In this video, I'll be talking about scope creep in video game projects and what I'm currently doing about it. Hello, howdy, and good day, my fellow gamers and game devs. My name is Ricky, and I'm an indie game developer for fun, working on my very first game, Cosmic Renegade, a D&D inspired space western RPG set in the Gold Rush era of hyperspace travel. Welcome to Devlog number 5. For the last 2 months, I was blindsided by scope creep, and I didn't even realize it. In my last devlog, I showed off a text-based version of my game with only a bare-bones user interface. Let's have a look at that real quick. It's starting to turn in our favor. Oh, the sensors. Their sensors are gone. Not much to see, huh? Well, my goal after that last devlog was to make my game a bit more playable. What that meant was that the player should be able to have an objective, figure out what to do, specifically learning the controls, and of course, experience some awesomeness. So, I buckled down for the next 2 months and got to work. Here's what my game looks like now. So, we are back in Unity. As you can see, I have changed quite a number of things on this game. The first thing you might be able to notice is the ships that I have in the middle. Some of the stuff you might recognize, like the panels, they kind of look the same, but this little thing down here is kind of new. We have ourselves a hotbar. So the number keys still work. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to encourage, and I chose the encourage ability that gives a bonus to any of the subsystems that I choose. For now, I'm going to choose the sensors because I'm trying to go for a lock-on. I'm going to hit 1 and then 1 again on the keyboard. And that pulls up this little targeting module. That's going to be helpful for multiple enemies later on. But for now, we're going to click on him. Good, we locked onto the target. And now we are going to fire on the target. This guy. Oh, there's a quick time event, and I passed it. Did you guys see that? Did you guys see that? There was a camera shake, there was a bullet, there was a little explosion when it hit. Yeah, and that's sort of one of the things that I added. As you can see, I added quite a number of things. But are all of the VFX, the explosions, the hotbar, the quick time events, all of it, is it real progress? Or is it scope creep? Real quick before we continue, we had about 8 subs last devlog, and now we have 12. Welcome those of you who are new to the crew. Glad to have you aboard. Now, where was I? Right, I think I experienced some scope creep along the way, and to illustrate this, I made a graph. In my head, I felt like I was making tremendous progress on my game by making it look better and more user-friendly, again, preparing for playtesting. However, in reality, I'd argue that I didn't really make any actual progress, because I just continued the work on the combat portion of the game and not any of the other stuff. So between the time of basically the last devlog and this one, I've cultivated quite a bit of discouragement because I still don't think that my game is good enough to get in front of strangers. Why? Well, it's because I can't really test my core gameplay loop with this. It's not a minimum viable product, certainly not the one that I described in my third devlog that I can get some meaningful feedback from. How did I let this happen? How did scope creep sneak up on me without me knowing? Long story short, I think I loved my game a bit too much. See, I was chasing playability, and because of that, I thought I needed to spend a lot of time polishing my game to make it playable. But playability does not always equal polish, something I wish I knew from the beginning. While I do think there is a minimum level of polish needed to get people to try your game out, I don't think it's nearly as high as you might think. Which brings me to my next point. Your indie dev goggles make it difficult for you to see the true big picture because of how attached you are to your game. That's just the humble truth. It's kind of similar to how NPC guards in Metal Gear can't ever seem to detect Solid Snake even though he's hiding behind or underneath a cardboard box. Recall the expectation versus reality graph. Let's say that since your last round of feedback, you worked really hard on your game, polishing it up so that people will be interested in trying it. After a few months of working behind closed doors, you release the second devlog. But since there wasn't really any feedback in all of that time, you run the risk of your game not being as good as you thought. As a result, the differences between expectation and reality are too great, and you get discouraged and never complete your game. And I feel like this is why a lot of otherwise brilliant indie game devs either like lose faith in their games or the games just kind of die because the passion disappears. Instead, here's what I think you and I should be doing. If we can release a playable version of our game, and we do it often, we only have to deal with a little bit of discouragement at a time instead of a whole bunch at once. And as we keep these small feedback loops over a long period of time, we can see that discouragement gets smaller and smaller as our expectations begin to meet reality. In fact, discouragement reaches zero, and when it reaches zero, momentum starts to take over. But again, this is all dependent on getting a playable version of your game out there, even if it's unpolished. It's no wonder that some of the best developers on YouTube, like CodeMonkey or Thomas Brush, say that it's better to work on a lot of smaller games early on in the beginning of your indie game journey before starting to work on your big dream game. Now, I finally get why they were saying that. Fortunately, scope creep is not a total lost cause. Even though I've seen a lot of videos claiming that it's the biggest mistake that you can make as an indie game developer, I certainly think it's one of the more common mistakes, and I honestly don't think it's all that bad. Responsible experimentation is important in any learning process. So, I don't think spending time building out game mechanics that I've never built before was a complete waste of time. I think it was useful. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that a lot of the game mechanics and systems that I made will be quite useful later on, as long as I can store them in a place that I can find later. I call this concept scope creep delayed rewards. In order to take full advantage of this, you're going to need to have a good system in place to reference all of the work that you've done. For me, I use a combination of Obsidian and GitHub to document and store specific versions of my game that I can reference later if I needed to. In almost all cases, working on something that you're passionate about is rarely a waste. We just don't know what we're going to get out of it right now. Here are 3 things you can do to avoid or move on from scope creep. Number 1, nail down that MVP, or minimum viable product. Limit what you're going to put in front of strangers. If the game is fun, even if it's unpolished, you'll know that it's going to be a successful game. And if you need help, watch my 3rd devlog after this one. Number 2, get your game in front of strangers. You can certainly share it with friends and family, but they might not be the target market for your game. By the way, if you're interested in getting access to the very first build of my game, join the waitlist. There is a Google form in the description. My goal, soft goal, is Christmas, so don't miss out. And finally, number 3, be detached and just listen to feedback. Make sure you're also paying attention to the why behind each piece of feedback that you get. Are the people saying that even in your target market, do they not like something because it's hard to understand or because it's actually broken? When they say your game is good, try to ask them why, and specifically what about it made good. At any rate, that's all the advice I have so far. As I keep going on my indie game dev journey, or whatever you want to call it, I'll continue to post new videos about all of the stuff that I'm learning, in addition to progress on my game, Cosmic Renegade. For now, see you in space, cowboys. So I never really know what to talk about here. My next plans for the game are to stop working on the combat and to start making like a tiny galaxy. I'm thinking maybe like 4 planets each with their own imports and exports list of goods that you can trade. Like for example, you can buy an export from one planet, say it's like coffee or something, and then ship it to another planet to get a nice profit for importing it. Then you can spend that profit on ship upgrades and modifications, which will, I think, really complete that initial game loop I had and make my game feel like a real game. If you guys have any planet suggestions, I am very open to those. Please feel free to comment them below. I'd honestly love to hear what you guys have to say.